The MacBook Pro 16 is currently the top dog of the Apple MacBook lineup. Yes, there have been some additional releases recently, but apart from port option, storage option, memory option, lots of options, it's still the highest end MacBook that you can buy at any price point. So that really leads into the question, should you buy one in 2021? Let's find out. Haven't gotten to slam the MacBook Pro 16 down in a while. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. See, it's always a balancing act of like too reflective versus not reflective enough. So I've had this MacBook Pro 16 for a hot minute now, and prior to moving everything over to the new M1 Max, this was my workhorse both here in the studio and out and about. And honestly, when this was released, it was the only real option to get actual power out of a Mac without spending iMac Pro, Mac Pro, or one of those high-end iMac money. Like, this was the best budget option, even though it costs as much as my motorcycle. Though, like I said, there have been some disruptors released in the last few months, and the price of the MacBook Pro 16, despite those disruptors, it hasn't really dropped. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna split this video into two parts. The first part will be why you should still consider the MacBook Pro 16 if you have a computer need right now. And the second will be why you shouldn't buy one, even if your hair, like, I don't have very much hair, so we're not gonna use my hair as an example. But if your hair is totally on fire about buying a computer, then still don't buy the MacBook Pro 16. So first up, let's talk about why you should still consider this big behemoth of a laptop. Number one, like I said in the intro, it's still the only MacBook that really has legitimate internal storage options. As much as I love the MacBook Pro 13, even the M1 option, you only get a 2 terabyte solid state drive at its highest configuration. While yes, that's enough for me, and I would say if you need more than that, go ahead and just get an external solid state drive, but some folks need the maximum amount that they can get without bringing extra stuff along. Because let me remind you, or instead of reminding, let me inform you if you don't actually do that much remote working, every extra thing you need, it's like a chain of problems waiting to happen. If you need an external drive to make up for your computer's lack of internal space, that's a cable that could get lost, or a drive that could fail. Are those odds pretty low? Well, for me, the losing one isn't all that low because I lose stuff all the time, but peace of mind can actually be worth a dollar amount. And if your peace of mind is worth more than the cost of an external hard drive, the MacBook Pro 16 is still the best computer for you. The second reason you should get one of these beasts is because of the display. The Retina panel here is gorgeous, sharp, color accurate. It's still one of the best laptop screens in the market. But what makes this a purchase level decision good is all of the extra real estate. I bring up my age often in these videos because as I get older, I'm finally accepting that I don't want to scrunch over a tiny laptop screen anymore. And when doing long work trips with my MacBook Pro 13, in the past, I've needed to bring along a separate external monitor. And you know what? That sucks. Just like bringing along extra cables for a solid state drive suck, kick that up to, well, way more with cables, power brick, and other junk needed to haul around a wide screen monitor. And the 16-inch display, well, no, it's not as usable as a big monitor. I do think it's big enough that I can still use it by itself while getting plenty of multitasking done. One of the things that you'll suffer from these smaller MacBooks is you don't have enough space to put things. Plus, it's still the only display that has the slightly newer design behind it. In fairness, it does though have pretty big bezels if we look what else is on the laptop market. But in Apple land, these bezels are razor thin. The next reason to buy the MacBook Pro 16 is, to me, a weird one. It's not something that I would use, but again, some folks like having options. If you want to run Windows through Boot Camp, your best bet is still one of the Intel-based Macs. I have seen others get Windows ARM running on the M1 MacBooks, but I don't think that's exactly what a dual Mac/Window user would need in a portable machine. This will still allow you to have all of that Microsoft goodness and run all of those extra programs pretty seamlessly and without much extra added hassle. I don't ever use it, so there's not much else for me to say about Boot Camp other than it exists, and that's a good reason in and of itself. So on to the next reason. And that next one is the dedicated graphics card options. Yes, they are Radeon graphics card, which wouldn't necessarily be my first choice, but despite that, you can get a few different options from a more entry-level 5300M with 4 gigabytes of memory all the way up to a very beefy 5600M with 6 gigabytes of HBM2 memory. If you're confused by what that means, you'll basically get the equivalent of a very powerful desktop graphics card, which In a laptop, that's pretty darn powerful. My favorite power laptop that I've got right now is the Razer Blade 15, which has a dedicated RTX 2060, and that thing flies, and you can get a very, very powerful graphics card in here. So I don't know that I'd ever really recommend a Mac for gaming, though. He says that now. I guess let's wait and see if Apple releases their own dedicated graphics card and we can make a determination then. But this is about as good as you'll get without buying one of those ridiculously expensive Mac Pros. Did you see them? Have you seen those videos where it's like the $30,000 Mac Pro and it's got the graphics card and the burner card? Yeah, this is a little bit better. Plus, if you are looking for more creative applications, these higher end graphics cards will still give you the best performance if you are willing to pay for it. Some video editing software really needs a dedicated graphics card, and it doesn't matter how much we put into the M1s, they still don't. This still comes out on top in certain situations. We already talked about the screen of the computer, but let's talk about something else that the MacBook Pro 16 has as an advantage. Port selection. Even the current most expensive M1 MacBook Pro 13 only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. And yes, they are functional, but working around that limitation is one of the biggest weaknesses of those new computers, and it drives me crazy. If there was one thing, if I could just snap my fingers and change one thing about the M1 Max, that's what I would change it. The MacBook Pro 16 has 2 ports on each side, making it so much easier to use this as the center of a computer system. We talk about this a lot, but I basically use laptops in one of 2 ways. Laptop mode, which is pretty self-explanatory, just the laptop by itself, and then dock mode, where I've got it plugged into my dock, I've got an external keyboard, external mouse, all of that stuff. And it's so much easier to use the MacBook Pro 16 in dock mode because you have more options. Look at this. I get it. It sounds like a small thing, but seriously, try plugging in a lot of external devices and it will quickly drive you to madness when you've only got 2 choices. And they're right next to each other. This is so much better. Plus, another significant advantage port-wise is the MacBook Pro 13 can only push signal to 1 external monitor. This may change in future releases, but as of right now, all you can get. That is absolutely a limitation of the M1 processor, not the Thunderbolt 3, but the processor itself. The MacBook Pro 16, on the other hand, can push to up to 2 6K displays or 4 4K displays. That's a world of difference. And if you are one of those people that have one of those wall-o monitors, like, you know who I'm talking about. If I'm talking about you, you know I'm talking about you. I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the wall-o monitors, as I only use one. You straight up cannot do that natively with the M1 Max. That might be a decision maker right there by itself. And the last major reason I would say is a reason to continue to get the MacBook Pro 16 is if you enjoy using your computer for listening to music or editing audio without the need for headphones or external audio monitors. And that's the speakers. No surprise here, I think I mentioned this in every single MacBook Pro 16 video, but the speakers on this thing are phenomenal. Easily the best that I've ever seen on a laptop. And they are so good that they are all non-audiophile me would ever need. It's remarkable. It's really remarkable how crisp and clear they can sound while also having a surprising amount of bass for a laptop. I'm sure there are other cool audio things that I could tell you they do well. I just don't know how to articulate it. They sound incredible. And that's a long story long. These speakers, they're amazing. They are amazing. Okay, Gary, thanks. We get it. You love MacBooks and you think that we should buy every single MacBook out there ever made, period. You want us to buy everything. No, I know if you see all the back catalog, those are all like snapshots in time. I don't actually think that you should buy everything on the market. But if you have a need now, you should buy what you need now. Do not wait for whatever future tech is on the market. And despite that, here's where we change gears and we're gonna talk about the main reasons why, if you are in the market for a laptop right now, probably look somewhere else other than this beast. And number 1, the price. Sure, you can find the base model on sale for around $2,000 on any given day, but even then, that's still so expensive compared to those M1 Max. And we'll talk about performance in a second. And if you do want to turn this into a powerhouse, you want those shiny things that I mentioned in the reasons to buy, you are looking at a several $1,000 laptop to get the best processor, reasonable like 32 gigabytes of memory, good graphics card, and if you do want more storage than the M1s can do, that will run you over $4,400. $4,400. That's motorcycle money. That's first car money. I get it that these are tools and they should have a return on their investment. So are you spending that much to get more out of it? Then great. But today, it's probably too rich of an investment for my blood and my recommending blood. It's a weird saying that I'm never gonna use again. The next reason, okay, we said performance, and it's not exactly, I'm not gonna say performance again because we did kind of talk about it in the reasons to buy it. And you can get a version of this laptop which is phenomenally powerful, probably the most powerful laptop in the world. But I would say performance in a price to performance way. It's just not there for me. And I'm qualifying this because my specific programs and apps that I use have transitioned over to the M1 architecture. So for me, they run blazing fast. And if yours haven't, then the 16-inch might still be faster, but you will have to spend so much to get that speed. For example, I've been doing all of my big video editing tasks over the past month on a $1,300 MacBook Pro 13. It's half the cost of this, and it's just as fast, if not faster. It's just too much of a brute force machine at this point, when there are more subtle machines out there. The next reason to not get this big old laptop is fan noise. It's there. You'll always hear it when in use, and especially if you plug it into one of those two 6K or 4K monitors. These fans, they'll be spinning. Sure, it will never be loud enough to hurt, and different people have different tolerances for this phenomenon, but let me tell you again, as someone that's been using an M1 Mac, it's so nice to not have to hear my computer all the time. My office, if we were to go in my office right now, it's basically
we're here right now.
Quiet all of the time.
If you hear something, that's the dehumidifier from the room over there. It's not the computer.
Unless I turn on my Windows PC to play some games on. That's not a knock against Windows. It just is much louder thanks to that big desktop cooling system. And frankly, this is one of those small annoyances that won't bother you until you try out the new Apple offerings. It won't bother you, but once you hear true silent performance, you'll never be able to go back. Those new computers will ruin this for you forever. Thanks, Apple. You ruined my favorite computer. The next reason I would hold off on buying the MacBook Pro 16 is battery life, which is another thing. It's not terrible about the 16, but it's just not as good as you can get elsewhere. Are you seeing the trend here? The MacBook Pro 16, it still meets all the little tick marks. If you go through what I look for on a computer before I recommend it, this absolutely hits all of the marks. It just does it for way more money than I would want to spend or recommend somebody else spend. The MacBook Pro 16 will get you 11 hours of battery life. That's with the largest battery that they could legally put in here and still get this computer on an airplane. Granted, I haven't done very much in the past 9 months, so maybe this requirement has lost some power over the course of me being trapped in my house. I mean, working from home, but still. Come on, 16. Even the $1,000 that I'm pointing at my MacBook Air. Even the $1,000 MacBook Air has so much better battery life and does so with almost the same power for a fraction of the money. 11 hours is still totally doable, and I would consider it excess. But when you can get better battery life out of a smaller battery on one of the new computers, it makes me real curious to see what they'll be able to pull off with this giant battery on an M1 16-inch MacBook. And the last reason that I wouldn't currently buy the MacBook Pro 16, it's just not the future. As much as I like this computer, and I've done a ton of work on mine, it's now the past. It runs hotter, it's more expensive, will eventually, like in a long term eventually, this won't happen tomorrow, it will eventually run out of updates, it makes more noise, and it doesn't have as long of a battery life. And it needs a bigger brick to provide the whopping 90 watts of power this sucker needs. That makes me feel like Doc Brown. 1.21 gigawatts. This is a 1.21 gigawatt. But at the end of the day, so what, right? Look, the MacBook Pro 16 is a great computer. When it was released in late 2019, this was a saving grace for Apple, as their 15-inch models had bad keyboards, bad thermal performance, and they just were not worth the money that you spent. And the 15-inch MacBooks caused a whole host of people to leave the Apple ecosystem. And a lot of them came back thanks to the 16. If you have this computer right now and you are happy with the performance you are getting, I don't see any reason to leave it. This will still be just as powerful and give you all of the external display functionality you could need, same as it did yesterday. Tomorrow it will do the same thing. Still such a good computer, but if you are looking for a new computer or looking for your first Mac, I would recommend taking a good hard look at the software you really need and that you are planning to run, and see if it's either already been or will shortly be updated to the M1 processors. If you do that, then I can wholeheartedly recommend those. The M1 computers are much better value for your dollar, or whatever your currency of choice is. They're so good at value, it's really hard for me to recommend the 16 as a new buy anymore. You can get so much power in a $699 Mac Mini these days. Everything else, even the other Apple computers, they feel like a step behind. But if you liked this video and you are curious, you're like, Gary, okay, I heard you talk about the reasons to get it, the reasons not to get it, and you'd like to see this pit head to head against that MacBook Pro 13 that I was talking about, here's a link to the video where I do just that. We put them right against each other and make them fight. And you can see that video by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. They don't actually fight. Thanks for watching.